What's
What's
up?
up?
How's
Starting
it
it off.
going?
Yeah. Jesus. Here we are again, talking over each other.
I love it.
What's going on, Mason?
What's going on? Cheers. This is
Cheers.
episode, 25, 26?
26.
26. Here we
Episode
are.
episode 26, virtual happy hour.
Virtual happy hour. That's why we're
And
having drinks. Late night
yes,
style.
late night style. For those of you, our last couple podcasts were recorded at like 9:30 a.m. This one's being recorded at almost 6 p.m. So don't worry, we're not drinking, at 9 a.m. And even if we were, don't judge us. We're going to be talking about day drinking today, but today's all about, just us drinking, chatting. And we're going to do a lot of reminiscing over, kind of the times that we've had together as friends, as drinking buddies, and kind of how, terrible COVID was, but how great COVID was for reconnecting with people. We're not going to focus on all the negatives because, if you want to hear all the negatives about COVID, go watch the news, man. We're not covering all that bullshit. So, I'll probably get some heat for that, but, it is what it is. But we kind of want to just talk about how COVID was really great for reconnecting people and reconnecting families, friends, all that kind of stuff. So that's a bulk of our podcast today. And, let's get into it. I want to just start by kind of reminiscing on, a couple experiences that we've had that we haven't touched on yet. And I want to start with first our post-graduation dinner gift, which was
absolutely blown away.
Which was nice. We were able to go to Alinea for our post-graduation gift. My parents and my grandparents got me a kitchen table experience for Alinea, which is for 6 people, and my
be the lucky date.
got to be the lucky date because someone else dropped the bag. So Mason got put into place, and I was so glad that you could be a part of that because Alinea was just
absolutely amazing.
It was like 3.5 hours, 22 or 24 courses.
Yeah.
And it was just incredible.
And if you can hear my dogs, sorry, y'all.
Yeah, dogs are going crazy. Mason's been at work all day, and his dogs are just jonesing to see him, and they're just going ape shit in the background. Which last week we apologized for the dogs, and then you couldn't even hear them in the recording. So we can hear the dogs, but you all might not be able to hear them. So,
anyways, back to Alinea. It was just absolutely amazing. What an experience. Thank you for sharing that. And 22, 24 courses, whatever it was. And you could have chosen a pairing to go with it, wine pairing. And me and you both opted to go out. And that was just so that we could enjoy the food experience in its full
sense.
Amazingness.
Yeah. And for us, because we were both 21, and we were for me, because Alinea is not a cheap place to eat. I think the kitchen table is $500 a person after tax and gratuity, and which is a crazy amount of money to spend on a dinner. But if you have the means and the opportunity, definitely take it, because it was probably one of the craziest experiences of my life. But we didn't want to do the pairings because I think our biggest fear was, we would have drank too much, and then, we wouldn't have been experiencing the culinary genius that we were experiencing. And
remember, we were fresh grads.
Yeah, we were fresh grads. We had graduated maybe a week before,
maybe
if
3 or 4 days, maybe.
Yeah. And I'm gonna post a photo on our Instagram this week of us with Mike Begal, who was the executive chef of Alinea at the time, because it's just funny to see us. We just look so young, and we're in our suits, and we're just My hair was like fucking super long and like goofy looking. And but I'm gonna post that this week as kind of like a little, reminder, that just to reminisce on those experiences. But I think we ended up drinking, like, they poured us some champagne when we sat down. Yeah. It's just like a congratulations. I think it was a rosé champagne. Welcome. Yeah, like a little welcome toast. And then one of the courses was in the kitchen, and it was like a little bite. It had finger limes, and I don't remember what it was. But then it was like a whole cocktail presentation where they had like this old school like cocktail shaker, where it was a couple like Boston shakers on this mechanism, and they like cranked it with like a hand crank, and it like shook the cocktail shakers. Yeah, exactly. Just like that.
Hilarious.
And, like we had that cocktail. I don't remember what the cocktail was, but it was phenomenal. And just like that, but we didn't count those as drinking because it was part of the meal. We didn't want to do like any excess. Yeah. We didn't want to do any excess drinking.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And then, just the whole meal was like just amazing. Like the edible balloon, it was like a grape flavored balloon. They did like, the thing that I always talk about the most though was one of two things. That potato salad, that truffle potato salad with that they made tableside with the potatoes that were cooking in the middle of the table for like 4 courses.
The whole beginning.
Since the beginning.
Like they were just already there, ready to go. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, they like unearthed them out of holes. Yeah.
And then pulled it out and we're like, hey, so what do y'all think so far? We're like, what? Making our potato salad thing. Crazy.
And then just shaving like those Australian black truffles on it. And I was like, oh my God. And then the other, well, I'll talk about two more things. The other thing was the whole experience was just amazing. But the other crazy thing was they brought out like this glass bowl, like a clear glass bowl, and it had like it either had a Butterfinger wrapper or a Reese's peanut butter cup wrapper inside. Like you could see it, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And they're like, okay, take your finger and put it in the middle of the bowl. And in the middle of the bowl was like a gelatin. Like it felt like Jello. And they're like, okay, like now like scoop out the gelatin. They gave you a little spoon, and it tasted like either a Reese's peanut butter cup or a Butterfinger, but it was like crystal clear, and it was Jello. And I was like, what the fuck? Which is, they were able to do it through like a process distillation, a rotary evaporator.
It was crazy.
When I worked at Aviary, we had 3 of them upstairs, which was crazy.
That is cool.
Clarified bananas, which are really hard to clarify, like clarified carrots, all sorts of crazy shit. But they basically like pureed Butterfinger and Reese's peanut butter cups and like put it through this evaporator, and it basically distills without creating alcohol, but it distills a clear form of whatever you're trying to clarify. And then the last thing was the table side, like dessert, when they come out, like, cause
they start rocking the music.
Yeah.
And they walk up, they start chatting about it. Mm-hmm. And then they go to the center of the table, and then they go, oh, let me just get this ladder real quick. And you're like, what?
Yeah, put out the ladder, drop something and smashes all over the table. Yeah. Yeah.
And then they smash everything on top of it.
Yeah, and you're in like this glass box within the kitchen. So you can see the kitchen the whole time. Like you can see the chefs walking around, and Chef Ackett's wasn't there that night, but just see how everything's done. And then like you see the chefs walking in with different things, and they're swooshing it on the table. They're dropping shit from high up, and it's smashing, and there's dry ice and liquid nitrogen stuff. And it's just like it's just a crazy experience.
It's just a piece of art that they're doing in front of you. And then you enjoy eating it afterwards.
Yeah. And it's just like the way they do it, it just looks like you don't want to eat it, but like every component is edible, and it's all like so delicious, and it all works well. And yeah, exactly. And since, that time, I've been lucky enough to go to Next and some of the other restaurants and have more of those like chocolate matte style desserts, which everyone has been fantastic. But the best one to me was the one at Alinea, because I think at that point we were all just like so like, oh, like we were like in love, we were starstruck, and everything was just like, oh my God, it's just the perfect evening. And then we got home and you brought a bottle of, I forget what vintage it was, but you brought a bottle of Camus and,
It was 90.
it was an
No.
old bottle.
No, it wasn't that. Maybe 2000.
Yeah, I think it was early 2000s Camus, which is actually when Camus
2005.
was still making like good wine. No shade.
Yeah. That one was a gift from the now father-in-law.
Nice. Yeah,
And
and that was great. So we drank after we got home, but during the experience, we wanted
that's
to.
okay.
Yeah, we wanted to put the beverages aside and just enjoy the experience for what it was. So, but yeah, that's kind of a good reminiscing of like a pre-COVID experience that we had. This was in 2017. Yeah, 2017, which is crazy. 5 years ago. It's just crazy how fast time goes and how much has changed since then. Like I'll look at pictures of like, I was just looking at pictures of Alinea the other day. I'm like, man, we look so young. Like you look pretty similar, but like I didn't have any facial hair and I didn't have all these fine lines that I have now. And
I had a little bit more hair than this.
Yeah, a little bit more hair, but we were both like very clean cut, like just graduated from CIA, and which was a very strict like no facial hair thing. I think you could have a mustache, but I look really creepy with a mustache. I look not the mustache does not suit me. It looks better when it's fully in. But
I had a beard for like a minute, and then the wife said, "Nah," and I was like, "All right, well, I guess I'll get rid of it."
Yeah. See, if I don't have, like, you look like a normal human being. Like, if I don't have a facial hair, if I don't have any facial hair, I look like I'm maybe 18, but like an old.
Excuse me, sir. Are you old enough to drink here?
Yeah.
Can I see your ID?
It was funny. I was living in Chicago and I would always go to the same liquor store and like, they never carded me. I shaved my face, like completely shaved, and they carded me. And I'm like, you just sold me alcohol yesterday and you didn't card me. And then I like came in clean shaven. So like now I don't ever shave my face because I look like a baby, but like an old baby, like a baby that's seen some shit. So yeah. I keep the facial hair because it's not a good look for me. So, but I kind of want to talk about, like that reminiscing and like connecting with people. Cause I think that now more than ever, that's super important. And I think COVID kind of taught us or, kind of showed us that like, hey, connect with people you haven't connected with. And I think that whole like staying home for like a couple months and depending on where you were, like 6 months, you ran out of shit to do. So you're like, let's call my family or let's call my college friends. And, we had a lot of virtual happy hours. Just like this, we're quote unquote out of COVID now, but we're still doing a virtual happy hour because we both live 3.5 hours away from each other. So virtual happy hours is what we got for now.
Closer than Indiana.
Closer than Indiana. Yeah. Cause before we were probably 12
Well, New York
hours.
to Indiana. What's that? 8?
No, longer than that.
Is that more?
Oh
10?
yeah, when I would drive from Indiana to CIA, it was like 13 hours.
So minus 2, 11.
11 hours.
11 hours to the city, and then now I moved south, and then it was 18, and now you move south again, and now we're 4.5.
Like 3.5, which isn't bad, and now you got a house, so I got to come up and see you, but
yeah, it's new funness.
I think the thing that I took away from COVID the most was like, just fucking call someone and have a conversation, crack open a beer, have a drink, just maybe drink some hot tea, whatever you're into, and just like chat, and have a conversation, because I think, and I think COVID was really good for our friendship, because not that we ever lost touch, but I mean, we would go a couple months without talking, and we're good enough friends that when we would talk, it didn't matter. We would
right where we left off, catch up on the last little bit, and then go right back to where we were.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But I think it kind of was like, okay, like life's telling us to slow down and like reconnect and reminisce about our past and enjoy. Yeah. And I think even now that like COVID is not as crazy as it was at the beginning. Not saying it's not there, because it definitely is still there, but it's a little bit, now we're able to meet up and go to weddings and go to parties and things like that. But I think, Zoom calls and Google Meets and Teams and all those kind of platforms are still really great for us to kind of utilize and reconnect and chat with people.
I think, yeah, I agree. And I think the big question is to video or not to video call. Like,
to me, always video.
I agree. But I think before, COVID, I would just be like, quick phone call, quick text, it's good enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then, after going through COVID and having 6, 7 months, year, 2 years, whatever it was, without seeing a person that you cared about a lot, and then seeing them again really was pushed to that limit where you're like, man, I just need to video call you or FaceTime you or whatever it is just to see you more often, just because not being able to see that person change. And just like, even just the small little things, like they cut their hair, they, dyed their beard, whatever it may be. You don't dye your beard. That's not what I'm saying. But
I might now.
You're good. You don't have gray hair. But, like with your parents, your best friends, your happy hours with coworkers that you wanted to hang out with more often and just had issues because of COVID and couldn't go out anywhere because we were all trapped inside. You really like wanted just to see people, and that was like very important to learn. And I think now it's almost always FaceTime, Zoom, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I'm definitely in the same camp as you. Like, I love video chatting with people because for me, like, when you call someone and it's just an audio call, you put your phone down, you're cooking dinner, you're folding laundry, I don't know, you're on Facebook or Instagram or something, you're not fully invested in that conversation. Whereas if you're on a video call, and I'm on my phone and, you can see me that I'm not invested. Sorry, I slammed my phone down there, but,
get out of here.
Yeah. Like, you're not fully in tune with whoever you're video chatting, and they can see that. And I think it's kind of, for a long time, that was the personal connection that we had was through video calls, because we couldn't see each other. We were supposed to be 6 feet away, all that kind of stuff. And, stay away from me. But with video calls, it became like the new norm. And now that we are able to see each other, but we're far away, so we're not able to see each other, video calls to me are still the most personal, and they're the most personal thing you can do without being in person. So I think that, I'm all the way on video call and not on the no video call camp. I think we're on the same page there.
I agree.
So I think, yeah. And just the world we live in and like the technology that we have, it gives us the ability to do that. Because if COVID would have been here in like the 90s or the 80s, like, what would you have done? What would people have done? They would have just stayed home and not seen each other for 6 months or a year or however long. So I think we're really lucky to live in the time that we do. And have that technology at our fingertips where you could just jump on a video call and have a cocktail and cheers, through a camera. I think that's a really special time that we're living in. So
I agree.
I think the only thing that I don't like about the video calls is like the lag.
Or when people get blurry or
the video quality. And I think that's something to do with like our, like, and especially my impatience, because I'm like, technology, it should just work. Like, I don't understand why it's like not working, or like, I don't understand why it's like, what do you got, a potato
Wi-Fi
phone?
You have full Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Why is this not
working?
Yeah. Why does it look like one of us is filming on a potato? I just like, I think that's the only bad thing. And then, like you have that slight like lag time sometimes, and then you're like talking over each other. I was watching Key and Peele the other day. Like, I fucking love Key and Peele, and there's a skit where they're doing like a video call, and they're like, "Hey, how are you?" And they're both like talking at the same time, and I was like, man, that's like, and that was pre-COVID that they posted that. So I was like, man, that's like so true with like, and they were just getting so frustrated. And I won't talk about the end because it's a little depressing. Like Key and Peele they typically take their skits like just a little bit too far sometimes. I love it, but like, I'm like, man, that's kind of sinister. But, I think that's the only downside to me is like that, technology isn't always perfect. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like our impatience as people who have grown up having information at their fingertips at all times.
Totally.
So I think like to kind of like piggyback off of COVID and the good times of COVID, because again, we're not going to talk about the bullshit negative times because it's been all over the news for years now. I kind of want to just like say how fucking electric drinking has been since COVID has hit. And not that it wasn't electric before, but like, I feel like COVID gave you the excuse to just booze at any time. And like,
yeah, because you always worked from home. You finished your work early. You didn't have any drive time.
And you could just
restaurants wanted to create new things.
And you could just say, the world's fucked. I'm going to crack a beer at 10:30 a.m. and just booze today. And everyone's like, fair enough, man. Like the world is fucked up. Like, let's just run it
down. It's okay. You're not doing anything.
And I think that, like it reminded me a little bit of, I mean, I was still working a lot through COVID and I'm sure you were, and a lot of people were. And I think, but when I wasn't working, I was like, it's 10:30, let's crack open a beer. And, there's a lot of people who like aren't in the hospitality industry and they were able to kind of shift their 9-to-5 office job into like a 9-to-5 at home job. And I'm sure like those people were boozing all the time. Because
I bet you it wasn't even 9-to-5. It was more like 10-to-4 because, between 9 and 10 and 4 and 5, you're kind of leaving or coming to the office, not really starting anything.
And honestly, you could booze at home. All you have to do is turn off your camera or like mute your mic and you could be boozing.
Right. You never knew.
I mean, you couldn't do that
coherent.
Yeah, and I mean, you couldn't do that at the office. I mean, unless you got a flask, but then everyone's like, man, look at that guy,
Right.
But,
you get in trouble for that.
Yeah, you
still get in trouble at home, but,
Yeah, not as bad. Or it's not as easy to get in trouble for it, I guess.
Yeah. But talking about some of the restaurant things that happened, some of the really great things, I think, for me was like watching restaurants become very creative with what are they going to do to make money, because people cannot come in, and what are they going to do to push themselves further. And I think for me specifically, one of the coolest things that I thought came out of COVID was to-go cocktails, which really were not a thing before COVID, and was just something that was like a last minute thought, or you'd put it in your water bottle to go with you to the theme park, or to some sort of random charity event, or whatever it may be, where you're just like, I need a drink, but I'm just gonna hang out, and
I want it to look like I'm drinking
expensive.
Water. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The cocktails here are very expensive, and I need to have I want to have one drink there, so I'm not spending so much money.
Mm-hmm.
But, that idea of to-go cocktails really became a thing, I think, after COVID, and like restaurants would go, let me send you with a juice pouch, or let me send you with a bottle that was sealed, ready to go. And all you had to do was you get your food, you get your drink, you get home, and you pour it over ice, and you're good to go. Yep. And I think that's something really amazing that kind of I brought even with my wedding as one of the favors that everybody got to drink, which was my Boulevardier cocktail.
Yeah. And I think those like Capri Sun juice pouch things were like super popular in my, like where I was during COVID. And a lot of people would put like the popping pearls, like the little, like not boba, but the other ones that you'd get that have like the juice inside. And I just remember, because in my hometown, like even pre-COVID, you could drink on the streets. You could, anywhere within city limits, you could be drinking at any time of the day. The only stipulations was no like glass containers, and no, you couldn't be drunk. You couldn't be like blackout drunk and like fumbling through the streets. But like if you had a can or like a Capri Sun looking thing, or even like a Solo cup with booze in it, like the cops couldn't do anything. So I think it was really funny, during COVID, is like I would look out the windows of the restaurant and like, all these people would have like these juice pouches, or like sometimes Liv and I would go like walking downtown and I would like be carrying a beer with me. And I'm like, this is just phenomenal.
Well,
Like
I think
you don't even have to be at a bar or a restaurant to be like social and drinking, like, and we had some great conversations with people, because, we'd be 6 feet away. We'd all have our cocktail and we'd be chatting out on the streets, and like, we were social distancing and we were still able to chat and like see our guests that we haven't had in our restaurant in 3 months, because of the restrictions. So like that was amazing. And, then like, to me, the big thing is because I really started wine, like buying and collecting during COVID. And like I started Assemblage during COVID too, like in November of 2020. And, a lot of the reason why I started my wine collection was because allocations were just not getting taken by restaurants. So I was buying a lot of those allocations, and, some of them I would buy them through the restaurant, and a lot of them, like, I would just put out a post on Facebook and be like, hey, this is a pretty crazy wine. Like, we only 10 cases came into the state of Indiana this year, and I have a case. Like, cut you a deal on it. I only want to make a few bucks on this bottle, but like, here's some Burgundy, or here's some more Old Barolo, or here's whatever it was. And, just to get those like wines that were unapproachable for myself and so many people into, just people's hand that were looking to learn, was amazing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that I've always been like really proud of, and really like what I love about beverage is making it more approachable for people. And like, if you can make those allocated things, or those things that are hard to get, or for me, like wine has always been like, people see wine as like a fancy thing to drink, or like, oh, I don't understand wine, so I'm not going to enjoy it. And being able to like offer really cool things at really affordable prices for people has been, like that was amazing. So yeah, I loved being able to do that. And COVID made it possible, because without it, restaurants would have still been taking those allocations, and there would have been nothing to offer at good prices. So
totally.
And I think I don't want to call it, maybe it's bad. Maybe it's just not good, but I think COVID made people drink a lot more. When you don't have much to do and you don't have anywhere to drive to, maybe drink an extra cocktail
here, get a bottle there.
Yeah.
You're already at home.
But I think what happened with COVID is there's a lot of like influencers and a lot of people posting on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those things, with crazy cool cocktail ideas, like, oh, things that you might have in your home. Like, let's do this crazy fishbowl looking thing, or whatever it may be. And I think it got people to think outside the box and to kind of expand their beverage knowledge, or maybe they,
or like, try for the first time,
or try for the first time, or like, oh wow,
I've never made a cocktail. I've never made a loaf of bread. I decided to make one of those two things.
Yeah, and I think that like the beverage side of things and the food side of things, it made people more creative at home. And like, I've got nothing better to do, so like, I'm gonna learn how to make pasta, or I'm going to learn how to make this cool cocktail, or maybe I'm going to start doing like WSET exams online. Maybe like, I've always wanted to learn more about wine, but I never had time, and now I do. So I think it kind of made people a little bit more creative, or a little bit more, like, just let them dive into kind of their passions, or maybe they found a new passion over the pandemic. So, I think that was kind of a really good positive note Again, because we're not being negative in this podcast, because there's
no negativity, no need for
negativity.
that.
Was there any like trend or thing that you saw during the pandemic that you really like wanted to try, or that you kind of like found yourself like, oh, I never thought about that, or like let's look more into that?
I think the biggest trend for me was like the creation of similar style of cocktails to what they were. So, or variations, I guess is the best way to describe it. So doing like an old fashioned, but doing an old fashioned smoked with thyme, or smoked with rosemary, or, really figuring out a new way to infuse something with something else, I think was the biggest thing that I had the most fun with. Like, how do I make something so simple into very, very complex idea without doing too much work? I think that was what it's all about. Like watching simple steps, like taking a thyme leaf and catching it on fire and then covering it with a glass, and then making the cocktail on the side with the same thyme leaf after it's done smoking the glass, and throwing it in the cocktail real quick, shaking it, straining it over into that glass so it's all perfectly smoked together. Or, adding a little bit of simple syrup that is infused with thyme, or like any kind of other thing like lemons or oranges. I think one of my favorite ingredient for me was citrus in general, just all of the citruses. And one of the fun things I got to experiment with, which was lucky because of my local vendors, I guess the best way to describe it. My local vendors, farmers, they all had Buddha's hand, which was a cool, fun lemon style citrus. And just shaving off the skin of the Buddha's hand, and then blending it really, really fine, and then adding it to everything and anything, like the Manhattan cocktail style, with a little bit of that Buddha's hand citrus on top, just sprinkled ever so lightly to give you like the lightest coating over the top. Just like made sure every sip had a little extra punch to it. It was just super, super delicious. And I was just like, weird, but fun.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I love that. For me, it was a lot of like making ice. And it kind of goes back to my time at Aviary, because we had Kleinbell machines, which are essentially like big freezers. And they would make like 400-pound blocks of ice that were crystal clear. And it's a lot to do with directional freezing. So, if you don't, it's the only way to make perfectly clear ice. Because a lot of the times when I hear people, they're like, I have guests come in all the time, I make my own ice cubes. I've got the little rectangular or the little square molds that I make ice. And I'm like, it's probably cloudy, isn't it? And they're like, yeah. How do you make it clear? And I'm like, okay, well, when you're freezing ice, and no, it's totally fine. I'm like, I was thinking about ice. I was like, oh, it's kind of, the dogs are excited about ice too. And, so when you're freezing, and then I like feel like a giant nerd for talking about how water freezes, but when you're freezing water, and the best way to do it is, if you don't have a 400-pound Kleinbell machine in your house, which most people don't, you can easily buy like a little mini like igloo cooler that you'd go to like a picnic or a tailgate with, just like a little one that'll fit in your freezer. Pop the lid off. I think I had a 9-quart one. Fill it up halfway with hot water. So it's best if you take cold water and then boil it, and then let it cool a little bit. Pour it into the cooler. Pop that sucker in the freezer for like 24 hours. What happens is the water freezes from the top down, because it's insulated on basically 5 sides, the 6th side being the open air in the freezer. And what happens is the the ice will freeze from the top down. So all the sediment and all the impurities in water, like depending on where you're at, every especially if you're using tap water, all tap water has different minerals and things added to it to make it drinkable. All that stuff will basically settle to the bottom and will freeze last. And then if you pull it out before it's fully frozen, it'll come out, and that top part with all the sediment will be still kind of liquidy or like sort of half frozen. You're able to chip that away, and you're left with like about a inch and a half ish block of crystal clear ice. You let it temper for a little bit, which means basically just leave it at room temperature on a cutting board for like maybe 15 minutes, which will allow it to kind of reach a warmer temperature, which when you cut it down and break it into smaller pieces, it'll keep the ice from shattering on you. Because you're basically
done that too many times.
I know. And it really is annoying because you've just spent 24 hours waiting for this thing to freeze, and then you mess it all up. So if you let it temper on your cutting board for a little bit, and then I usually take a serrated knife, and kind of score it. And then I have a Lewis bag mallet, which a Lewis bag is essentially like a canvas bag with like a wooden mallet, which is good for making crushed ice. I'll take the mallet, which is like a wooden mallet, and kind of tap on the spine of the knife, and it'll basically cut straight through. And then from there, you can create, if you want to create like long, long rectangles. If you have like a Collins glass or a taller like pint glass, be great for those. Or you can cut it down into smaller cubes if you have like a rocks glass. And to me, like there's no better way to serve an on the rocks cocktail than on a crystal clear block of ice. And a lot of like I buy blocks, I buy perfectly cut cubes, and they're going to be a little bit more rustic because you've basically cut it with a knife. The way that commercial places make those crystal clear blocks of ice is they have a Kleinbell machine, and then they use a bandsaw to make it perfectly cubed. That's how they get it to be so perfect. So if you don't mind like the rustic look, it'll save you a lot of money because you'll pay easily $1 for a cube, where you can make it yourself, and you can make unlimited ice for basically the cost of that water that's going into, which is not expensive, and the igloo cooler, which you could probably get on Amazon, have it tomorrow for $15, 15, $20. I'm guessing you probably already have a serrated bread knife in your house. And then if you don't have a wooden mallet, use like a rubber mallet or use the hammer. Just got to be gentle with the metal hammer. But I think for me, it was making ice and doing different types of like trying to freeze fruit into the crystal clear ice. So it was like,
always fun.
It'd be clear, but there'd be like a piece of orange or a piece of citrus kind of like suspended in the ice. I was doing all sorts of crazy shit like that. So that to me was like, maybe not like something I saw on the internet, but it was just something that I was like, oh, I've got a lot more time. I'm going to freeze ice for fun.
It makes a little more detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I was drinking a lot of vermouth at the time too. So just pouring some like barrel aged vermouth over a big cube was like, just to me, like a super low ABV, easy drinking, like interesting thing to drink. And it was a conversation piece too. Which was good because COVID definitely made us need those kind of conversation starters.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like how awkward were you after COVID with trying to interact with people?
So for me, not super awkward. And I think because I was still like, Olivia and I were still like working in a restaurant. So, we would interact people with like, we'd both have masks on, but we'd still be in the restaurant doing takeout, things like that. So I think we still had those interactions, but I noticed like having conversations with people was harder because a lot of other people were trapped in their house. They didn't have that.
Know how to have a conversation.
Yeah.
They lost it.
They kind of lost that ability. So like we would always be talking, Liv and I would always be talking with each other like, man, like, are we awkward or like what's going on?
Or other people awkward?
And then after like having all these conversations, and then we'd find certain people that are like, man, like people just don't know how to talk to each other anymore. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Like, it's not us. You know, and you'd almost have to figure out, like, you'd have to find something, whether it was like a piece of clothing that they're wearing, or, you know, maybe they would give you a little piece of information like, okay, that's what we're going to talk about because you seem interested in that. And that's where we can kind of make that common ground. So,
Totally.
it just got really, it was just really strange. What about for you?
Definitely. I think I, didn't really ever stop working. I had a little break, but I was back to working as quick as possible. And just like having conversations with people was just kind of hard because they didn't either want to engage or didn't know how to anymore. And those two factors right there made it really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And like, I wanted to have a conversation. So I had to like kind of dig, like ask questions that were very general. And then whatever part of that sentence that they answered that they lit up and they like were super excited about, when somebody like adds a little more emphasis to something or wears something that they're very proud about or something like that, and you just kind of made the connection like, oh, that's so cool that you went to CIA and you're wearing the CIA logo. I went to CIA, blah, blah, blah. And you started that connection down the road real quick. And then, it always happened that you didn't end up actually making a connection. Somebody was just wearing something because they're wearing something. But, you still, because of that, you still had something and you made the ball start rolling and be able to break the ice, basically.
Right.
And I think that's what made it a lot easier to have conversations and kind of get things growing. But definitely took a while for the general population just to like want to engage again. And in
right.
myself included, like I always wanted people to engage, but like at a certain point you're just kind of like,
And I think both of us have that skill. I mean, you more so than me in that wanting to engage people and have those conversations. And I think that's something I learned a lot from you. I mean, I've learned a lot from you, like through our friendship, but you were always going out of your way. Like, well, this was way before COVID was even like a thought, but you were always going out of your way to like, hey, let's go, I'm going to go talk to Brad, which Brad's a good friend of both of ours at CIA. And, or I'm going to go talk to so-and-so in admissions, or I'm going to go here and talk to this person. And so for you, like, that's a great skill. And it's something that I learned to do, cause I'm a very social person, but I'm also, I can be very shy, whereas and now I'm not shy at all. Like if people are listening to this who know me now, they're like, this motherfucker is not shy at all. For a long time I was very like shy and like nervous to make conversation. Now I'm like, fuck, I'll shoot the shit with anyone that wants to have a conversation. So, which for you, like, and that's part of it. When those awkward conversations were happening, like right after COVID, I was like, I just, is it me? But I don't think it's me because I know how to have conversation. Like all these people are just like, they're just not. And I was like, man, it's fucking strange. But yeah,
it happened. But we all learned,
Yeah. And I think now that we're kind of out of it and we've had, a couple of years since like the pandemic hit, it's almost going to be 3 years in March, which is crazy.
Damn. Damn.
I think now people are a lot more like normal, or pre-pandemic.
The new normal
is what we're saying.
The new normal.
I think people are a little bit more like not weird and awkward when they're having conversations, which I'm super thankful for because that was a tough time.
I agree. It is what it is, but it's I'm glad it's basically over.
Yeah, again, it's basically over.
We're not there, but we're there. We're like more people are vaccinated or not, and it's enough that it makes sense and it works out for all of us.
Right. Yeah, I think kind of the last thing that I want to talk about is before we wrap this thing up, because I know you haven't seen your wife all day. I haven't really seen the fiance all day.
Into the hello buddy, hello. Plowing into I know.
The dogs do exist. We
They
weren't
do
just
exist.
making that up.
That was Bear, everybody.
So cute. Both your dogs are just the cutest dogs. It makes me want one, but I gotta wait a little bit.
Yeah. It's also a lot of responsibility later in life.
Yeah, and I think kind of the last point that I want to touch on is always like the thing that you and I have a lot in common, but I think a lot of the people that are in our circles, meaning like in the hospitality industry, is there's always like work to talk about, and there's always like what we're working on, like whether it's at work or maybe it's a cocktail that we've come up with or a great bottle of wine that we've drank recently. There's always something that like we're working on or working towards. And for me, for the last couple of years, it's been like assemblage, but it's always been like kind of a this is since our rebrand, and since like I've asked you to be a part of this process with me, like it was always kind of I don't really feel like working on it. I don't really have anything into it. It's just like, it's kind of something I do on the side. It was mostly a consulting business, and it's like not something I was like super into. And now I'm like, anyone I can talk to about assemblage, like I'm all about like, check out our podcast, check out our merch line, check out all this shit, like check out Mason's Instagram, all this stuff. And, yeah, yes, you do.
Yes, I know. I'm not very like social media like inclined yet. I'm working on it. I promise.
Yeah, and that's cool. And like, I mean that in like the most loving way. And not that my social media is also trash, but like it's like, I'm like, man, I had this great bottle. I'm going to post this shit. And you're more like, I'm living in the moment. I'm not going to post it. And like,
just forget.
And that's totally fine. But I'm like, for me, I use it as I'm not trying to show off, because I really don't give a shit about that. But for me, like, I like to go full circle. I like to look back, because I save all my like wine stuff on like a little highlight thing on my page. And then I can go back and be like, oh my God, like, look at all these wines. It's kind of like in our first podcast when we were in wines class. Like, I wish I would have taken pictures of all those bottles and like,
honestly,
and saved it, because you can kind of reminisce. And that's how I use social media. Is it's more like a time capsule for me. And that's the great thing about like this podcast. And now that we're doing video podcasts, like it's a time capsule, like our next podcast is probably gonna be better than this. And this podcast is better than the last. And like,
so
for
forth
me, like,
and so on.
Posting is like, you can look back at any time and like, wow, I've grown a lot since then. Or like, wow, that was a really fucking cool thing that we did. And to me, that's what it's all about. But like, I think that was kind of a long, weird tangent that I got on, and it's probably the tequila talking, but
that's why it's happy hour, chef.
That's why it's happy hour. And I think we've always kind of had that like, what are you working on, or how's work been, or what are you doing in your free time? And it always kind of comes back to beverage, or like
something related.
Your wife, my fiance, and then beverage. Because that's a big part of both of our lives. So yeah,
that's a great way to talk about it.
I had a full tangent, and then I'm like, fuck, what was I even talking about?
It's the cocktail that gets to
it's the cocktails. That's why we drink coffee during this podcast, because
exactly we have to stay online.
Yeah, but I mean, do you have anything else to kind of tie up this virtual happy hour, Mason?
I think the only thing to tie up the virtual happy hour is cheers. Wait, hold on. Need a little bit more, Cheers.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to episode 26, which we're calling Virtual Happy Hour. Name might change. Name might not change. Probably not. Nah. Because I mean, that's what it was. Be sure to listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Video will be up on YouTube. I've been a little bit slacking on the video editing. It's been coming out a couple days later, but I'm fucking busy, man. I got a lot of shit going on. Life happens. Be sure to. I'm always working on it. Be sure to check out the merch line at Assemblage or www.assemblagebevco.com, and make sure share our podcast, rate our podcast, because we definitely need more ratings on, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Mason's repping some of the old merch, the Assemblage hat, which has our old logo on it. Love to see it. And until next time. Any final words, Mace? Any drunken words?
Until next time. Thank you. Rep it. Love y'all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Day, night, whatever time you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Mason and Adam signing off.